you a roto-rooter plumber?
Guilty.
Did you fix what flooded my house?
Sure did.
Toilet overflow?
Nope.
Pipe break?
Getting warmer.
Busted water heater?
Nailed it.
How long can you hold your breath? Is that your real hair? What's the birds and the bees? Do you know where my grandma is?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a special late night edition of Trucking with Authority. I'm your host, Kenny Long, and I am here to help you navigate on your journey to success. We are going to do a short video tonight, not our normal live streaming event. We are not taking phone calls. I am simply here to address some comments, some things that I'm seeing in some of the Facebook groups about negotiation. I will be doing a video series on negotiation, and I wanted to do a live teaser for that series right now. It is late tonight. I will be watching the comments on the live stream on Facebook, but we will not be taking phone calls. We're also streaming live on YouTube if it's easier for you to catch the show over there. But what I want to talk to you tonight about is anchoring, the anchoring effect in negotiation. Now, anchoring is one party or the other in a negotiation throwing out the first number and setting a value on some item that is otherwise unknown. Now, there are several schools of thought on how anchoring should work. But before we get started on that, I want to try a little experiment. So, grab a sheet of paper. If you're driving, you can do some of this in your head, but please stay very focused on what we're going to talk about here, and I think you'll see the effects of what we're talking about. So if you're going to write this down, if you have a sheet of paper, take the last 3 digits of your phone number. And I think it's extremely important that you stay focused here. The last 3 digits of your phone number. Add 400 to the last 3 digits and write that number down. Go ahead and do that now. Simple math. add 400 to the last 3 digits of your phone number, whatever that is. Okay, now you have that number. I'm going to credit this to Professor George Seidel of the University of Michigan, professor in the business school, and he explains this pretty fluently. So you have the last 3 digits of your phone number, the last 3 digits of your phone number, add 400 to that number. And if I said that wrong the first time, the last 3 digits add 4 number. Now, listen to this story. Attila the Hun was one of the most feared conquerors in world history. He was defeated during the Common Era, meaning AD. So Attila the Hun was one of the most feared conquerors in world history, and he was defeated during the Common Era, meaning what year? AD. Now, think hard about that. What I want to know is, do you think that Attila the Hun was defeated before or after the number that you wrote down? Before or after the number that you wrote down? Now, if you're writing this down, write the word before or after. Now, write down the year that you think Attila the Hun was defeated. Write down the year that you think Attila the Hun was defeated. Okay, so we have that number. So the anchoring effect plays a lot of psychological game when you start talking to the other party in a negotiation. Excuse me. What I would like you to think about is, what relationship did your phone number have, and hopefully we're not having issues with the video here. What relationship did your phone number have Can somebody give me a thumbs up if we're still live? I think I might be having some glitches here. Are we still live? Are we still live? Anybody? Thumbs up? Yes, no? Okay. Thank you, Shane. So my question is, what relationship did your phone number have with Attila the Hun? Now, I want to show you something. Now, I gave credit to George Seidel at the University of Michigan. When he does this in front of his large classes, and I'll show this on the screen, these are the results that he gets. Now, I asked you to add 400 to the last 3 digits of your phone number. You came up with some number. For most people, if the number that you had in your head was between 400 and 600, the average was around 580 that people came up with. If it was between 600 and 800, the average was 670. 800 to 1,000, it was 920, and so forth. So you can see that the number that you had in your head oftentimes changes everything. Somehow it puts a value on the number that you come up with. Now, I understand there's outliers, and I know some of you may have come up with a number that was closer. But I haven't even told you what year Attila the Hun was defeated yet, but you all have a number. I can tell you that the actual number was the year 451. What number did you come up with? Was it higher, lower? How close was it to the number that you had in your head? So what that demonstrates, what that illustrates is the psychological effect that anchoring has when you're negotiating with someone. Now, where does an anchor come from? An anchor is simply the first number that is thrown out in a negotiation. And there's two schools of thought on who should set that anchor. The first school of thought is always, always, always have the other person, the other party, throw out the number first. And I admit that that is the way that I have always taught it. Always have the other party throw out the number first. The more that I see what's happening, with the freight market and with owner-operators negotiating their freight, the more information and feedback I get from owner-operators, and the more experience I get myself, and sitting on both sides of the table as a carrier and as a broker, I'm starting to change that policy slightly. So the second school of thought is never let the other party throw that number out first, because of the example that I just gave. Whoever throws the number out first sets the table. Now, I personally have experienced this. We've been looking at various commercial properties, and we're looking to buy various buildings or places to park trucks and so forth. I went to one particular property, and I looked at it, and I placed a value in my mind. I did some research, just as all of you will do research when you're going to quote a load. You'll look at lane averages. You'll look at your own numbers. You'll decide what you need. I did the research on this property, and the value that I came up with was about $150,000. That's what I thought that property was worth. I went into the negotiation. The other person started talking about all of the details of the property. Just like in a freight negotiation, it picks up at point A, delivers at point B. It's got, this is the commodity. It needs this type of securement. You need the appointment times and so forth. You get all of the details. Now, this gentleman was giving me all the details about this property, where it's located, the road frontage, truck accessibility, since I was looking for a truck yard, the commercial zoning versus residential zoning, and so forth. All of the different details. In my mind, I had that price tag of $150,000. That's what I thought it was worth. I didn't throw out the first number. When giving the details, this gentleman threw out $400,000. That instantly, and I noticed it, that instantly changed my thought process on the entire situation. I went in thinking that I would like to pay $150,000 for this property. He gave me all the details, threw out that number of $400,000. Now, my first reaction was, holy cow, that is way out of line with what I was thinking. Not even close to what I was thinking. But after a few minutes, I started to justify that number in my head. Had I thrown out the first number, knowing that I wanted to put that value around $150,000, had I thrown out the first number, probably would have said something around 110, 120 to leave room for negotiation. But when he threw out $400,000, instantly I started thinking about 300, maybe it's 325, but I was nowhere close to the 150 that I had originally thought about. The same thing happens in freight negotiations, the exact same thing. So when you call on a load and the price of that load is an unknown for really both parties, the broker doesn't know what he'll be able to hire a truck for. He's got a good idea what he'd like. The truck doesn't know what the broker's willing to pay. He's got a good idea what he'd like. And somehow those two parties have to come together. The first person to set the anchor sets the table for where the ZOPA is. ZOPA, Z-O-P-A, new term for you all. ZOPA, Zone of Possible Agreement. When this gentleman threw out $400,000, for the value that he placed on this piece of property, I know that the number I had in my head was nowhere close to being within that zone of a possible agreement. Not close. So instantly, because that number changed the entire zone of possible agreement, the numbers in my head instantly adjusted. I started thinking about all of the details of that particular property. You're right. This area is better than some of the others that I compared it to. This is a better place than the property down the street that I valued at that same $150,000. This is a better location. So you know, it might be worth more than $150,000. You know, also the zoning. You're right. That other property was zoned whatever C1. This is zoned C2, and it's better for trucks. And so you're right. That could have a little more value. This does have a building that's more suitable to my needs. You're right. It does. I started justifying the number in my head almost instantly. Almost instantly, I noticed it. The same thing happens in freight negotiations. When somebody throws out a number, instantly you start to justify it, or you have that instant shock of nowhere close. What's more dangerous is when that number is in what you would consider the zone of possible agreement. Now, I've taught quoting a load in the past, and I said you really need to have 3 numbers. You need to have your walkaway point, your dream number, what you really, really, really would like to have on that, and then your aspiration number, which is somewhere in the middle. That right there is your zone of possible agreement. Now, most of the time, if you were to set the anchor, I tell people, set it at somewhere near your dream number. Throw out the highest number possible. Set that anchor high. Now, and I'm talking from the point of view from a carrier. So the zone of possible agreement is set when you throw out that number. I'm reading some of the comments here, just trying to make sure, because I'm getting some red flashes here that's showing that my video is cut off, and just when the comments keep coming in, I know that I'm still live. So keep the comments coming and keep the discussion going, just so that I know that we're still good here. And if the video's choppy, I apologize. I don't know why I'm getting these red flashes here that shows we're cut off, but looks like we're good still. So again, establish that zone of possible agreement. Now, I always tell people to throw out that dream number. But if someone throws out a number that is somewhere within that zone of possible agreement, or maybe just outside of what you would consider that zone of possible agreement, all of a sudden, mentally, your zone shifts. What you think it's worth shifts. Again, in my situation with this property, $150,000 to 4, it was completely out of that zone. I tried to adjust my zone of possible agreement. I tried to adjust to value that and see if that was really what I wanted to pay. The same thing happens in freight. You start to adjust in your mind. Is that what I want to pay? And all of this happens without you knowing it, without you thinking about it. And it doesn't matter how much research you do. It doesn't matter how confident you are in your numbers. It happens because they set the table and they defined that zone. Again, if they set an extreme anchor that's way outside of the zone, instantly you have some major changes and you start to adjust. What's more dangerous, again, is when they set it just on the edges of that zone. Because let's say that you had a load that was, that you, in your mind, your zone of possible agreement was about $1,500. And your zone of possible agreement was $1,300 to $1,700. And the broker throws out a number of $1,200. They're just outside of that zone, but they're a little on the extreme low side of that. All of a sudden, most people become rattled a little by that and will change their initial offer or their counter offer. So while I would tell most people, if you're going into this negotiation, you want to throw out that high number of $1,700 to get started. But if the other party throws out a number of $1,200, oftentimes It leaves people rattled, and they will come down, and instead of throwing out the 1,700 number, they'll start with their counter offer of only 1,500, which is really what they wanted to offer, what really they wanted, their aspiration for that load. So now they started at 1,500. They can only go down from there. So I see people are commenting that maybe it's a little choppy and every platform is having issues. I will be releasing some recorded videos. This will be one of the many topics that we will discuss. But I think this one in particular is one that has been a hot topic lately. So we know what an anchor actually is. Now, how can you use it for your advantage? When should you possibly let the other party throw that anchor out? And how do you prepare yourself? First of all, knowing what the anchor is and what the psychological effect of having an anchor set in a negotiation does to you in the small little wheels in your brain that start turning, you can better prepare yourself not to be fooled by that. But going back to the first school of thought of letting the other party set that anchor first, if you have absolutely no clue, this is a new lane for you, you don't have any definitive information off the load boards, you don't have anything to compare it to, you come into the negotiation fairly weak, you don't really know what you need, you don't know what that load is worth. In a situation like that, to set the table, it's usually wise to let the other party set the anchor. Now, I usually tell people, and up to now, I have always told people to let the other party set the anchor, ask them what the rate would be. I'm starting to deal with some more advanced level negotiators. Negotiation to the next level, I would like you to start throwing out that number. Now, we're going to talk about how to set the anchor. If you don't really know and you're fishing for information, letting the other party set the anchor is a good way to get more information. You see what they value that particular shipment to be, what they think they might pay them, might pay a truck. Let them throw that number out, and you see what their zone of possible agreement might be. You have a pretty good idea. But if you have all the information, primarily your own numbers, forget about load board information, forget about the history, forget about all of what everybody else is doing, forget about what people say on Facebook. When you have your numbers and you are confident, you set the anchor. But you have to be extremely confident. There's no hemming and hawing. There is no weakness to be shown in this negotiation. You have to know exactly what you're talking about, and you set the anchor. All right. So I see some of the comments. Like I said, I'm following along. We're not taking phone calls tonight, but I am reading some of the comments. That's why I get a little distracted here, because I keep my system keeps showing that we are going off air, but the comments keep coming, so that's great. And I'm watching the comments as they come in. On many occasions, brokers start by saying, give me an offer, insist you giving them a number. I reply by giving them my highest rate, obviously, and click, they hang up. They don't even try to negotiate. I'm going to talk about that too. Is it Mila? Mila? Stuart says, shock and all of them go with a high number. Do you really want to do business that is like that with people? Okay. All right, so what I want to talk about is how you set the anchor. I will talk about in other videos that negotiation, every bit of negotiation is psychological. Everything you do is psychological. Setting an anchor is psychological. Just like I showed in that example with Attila the Hun. Your phone number has absolutely nothing to do with the death or conquer of Attila the Hun. but it persuades you and it changes your mind and sets the table, even though it's not related at all. You have that in your mind. I showed you examples about me buying property, and I can tell you it happens with everyone. It's interesting because doctors will, cardiologist, for example, tends to find more heart-related issues than an endocrinologist. Okay, so a heart doctor, because that's what they're looking for and that's what they know, tends to find more issues like that. But studies have proven you take a heart doctor, you send them in and send them to a meeting or a conference or something like that for something completely unrelated, like podiatry, studying the feet. They're just going out to hang with their podiatrist friends. All of a sudden, they start finding more circulation issues in the feet and legs. But they're heart doctors. And before going to this, because that's what's on their mind. How come before going to this seminar, they didn't learn anything? They just went to hang out with people. It's just a 3-day seminar. It's not medical school. But now that's on their mind. That's what they start focusing on. That they start finding those things. It's been proven that these types of things happen. When you buy a car, if you start seeing certain color cars in the lot, it's proven that those tend to be the cars that you buy. Salespeople and good negotiators train on how to use an anchor to help people make their decision, to lead people to make the decision that they want. It's all psychological. One of the tools that you can use is called setting an extreme anchor. Now that's what Mila, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right, I don't know if it's Mela or Mila, and Ben now says, my phrase is, my rate is, say the number, and stick to it. That click is to lower your standards rate. Brokers are networked. They can email your contract to help you set up if you call the next load. Okay. So those of you that are getting the click when you hang up, you're doing it wrong. You should never get a click. You should always be able to give an offer, set an anchor, and if click is the next thing you hear, you're doing it wrong. So yes, you want to set an extreme anchor. Now, just like in my case of buying the property, that extreme anchor that was set, shocked me. I almost did an about face, walked away. Shocked me. But I stuck around. I started to justify it. I started to think about counter offers and what I could do to negotiate. We didn't buy the property, by the way. If you just throw out a number and the way you say things, the tone of voice you use, again, it's all psychological. We'll talk about some of these other tactics in other videos. The tone of voice you use, the phrases you use, all will gauge the reaction that you get. So when you set an extreme anchor, let me give you a couple of tips. You go into a load, you're thinking that this load needs to be $5,000. And you know that that is on the very high side of the zone of possible agreement. If they really need it moved, they're going to pay $5,000 for the load, whatever the load is. But you know that they're going to be shocked with that number of $5,000. So how can you soften the blow so the next thing you hear is not, click, they hung up the phone? You need to play on their emotions. You need to prepare them for what they're about to hear. They give you all the details. Maybe they throw out their own number, and maybe you're going to counteroffer with an extreme anchor in the opposite direction. What you'd like to say is something to the effect of, I know my offer is going to be a little higher than you might want, but I would like to be at this number. You address the elephant in the room before you give the offer. You are going to tell them, your offer is going to be high. Prepare yourself. I know my offer will be a little higher than you might expect, but I would like to be at such and such number, $5,000. I know my offer is a little higher than you might expect, but I would like to be at $5,000. And you'd say, I would like to be. Throw it out and say that is negotiable. I'd like to be. My target rate is. Another thing you can do is use a range. I would like to be about $5,000 to $5,100. It doesn't sound as aggressive or as offensive when you say it's a range. It gives the indication that it is a negotiable number. And it softens the blow, and you're less likely to get that click. Now, when your real number, the number that you're working for, and I did this with one of our drivers earlier today, or I guess it was yesterday morning. She called us and she said, this broker is offering $1,800. I would like to be at $2,000. And I said, great. So your number is $2,000. You need to set an anchor higher than that. $2,300. I told her to offer $2,300, and that's what she did. When you offer an anchor that's higher than your projected number, it makes your actual number that you are shooting for, your actual target, more reasonable. Now, Cindy, who's one of our pros here at Patriot Star, says, I find that difficult word. I may be leaving money on the table, especially on last-minute weekend loads. Sometimes they will pay higher than I would guess. And what I would say to that is, and I understand that, I would say aim higher. One of the other tactics I talked about is the Japanese no. Shoot for that number as the first number you throw out. Throw out a huge number to set the table and gauge their reaction. Throw out a big, big number. And frankly, if your number is what you get, you win. You got what you asked for. Who cares if you left money on the table, so to speak? You maximize everything you can possibly get. You want to get every penny. But if you get your number, you win. Forget about what they make or what other people make. If you get your number, you won that negotiation. Lucas says, and they would like to be at 3,000 and they drop the phone looking for the cheap fish that would get it no matter what they want to sell it for. And that might be the case. An extreme anchor is designed to make them drop the phone. It's designed to make them shocked. Because if they're shocked at that number, they're going to be super pleased when you come down to the number that you're actually willing to get. Now, ways that you can help them accept that and try to change that psychological tone in their minds. And I talked about this before, is make them think that they have a deadline. And you throw out that number because they need to think that you have a backup plan. You have another idea. And so that number of $5,000 is on the very high end of your ZOPA. You'll say, this might be a little higher than you expected, but I'd like to be at $5,000. Now, I'm looking for some other loads, and I've got some other things that I've got my eye on, and I know that I could pick those up this afternoon, but I'd like to do your load for you and get this off your desk. I'd like to be at $5,000. It softens the blow. It puts a little pressure on them to move this load. Then you can go a step further and say, obviously they always counteroffer, and you can say, your offer is very generous, but how can I accept that when I have 2,000 other loads on the board that I can move today? You always put the ball in their court. Give them the power to counter you. Now, one thing I want to point out, the worst anchor in the entire business is a posted rate on a load board. I promise you that as a broker, I can move cheap freight all day long by posting a rate on the load board. Promise you. I have done some social experiments with this. I have tried working. We have a broker agent that works for us, and I've worked with him on it. And I said, look, we have these loads. We've posted them. We've called on other trucks. We're getting some rates in. We know what the lane should pay. I'll tell you what. Let's wash our hands of all these loads today. I want to go home. Let's forget about it. Post them with a rate. Now, I know for a fact, for example, there was a load that we were willing to pay around $1,500 to move. We posted it at $1,250 to give us some room for negotiation, and we easily would have came up to $1,500 because that was our target. But we set that anchor. We set an anchor by posting a rate on the load board. And I promise you, nobody countered us with $1,500. Nobody. Almost everybody, and we have 18 more of these loads to move. And everything that we've moved so far, every single time that we post a rate, nobody even asks for what our original target would be. Now, if they called on the telephone, and I know this is a fact because I've done this so many times now. When somebody calls me on a telephone and I have a good rate in mind, I'm a broker and I'm a carrier. I know what the rates should be. They call me on the telephone and I give them all the details. They always ask me for a rate because they don't have a clue. I always try to get them to give me a rate because I know they don't have a clue. And if you are a carrier or a driver and you're bidding on a load and you call a broker and you don't have a clue, you lose. I promise you, you lose every single time. You may come out of that thinking, I really got one over on the broker. I know I got a good rate. It's fantastic. I'm going to compare it to everything else. I'm going to look at the load board. I'm going to look at the averages. I know I got a good rate. But if you went into that negotiation without a clue of what that load should pay, other than I won't turn my key for less than $3 a mile or some other bumper sticker slogan of I don't haul cheap freight or something like that, that's your business model. If you go into a negotiation like that, you lose every time. And I count on people like that as a broker. I try to be fair. Believe me, I don't try to take advantage of any carriers. I know what it's like. But I know for a fact I can move loads cheaper if I post a rate because nobody even tries to negotiate. Because of that psychological effect of me posting a load, it's like putting a price sticker at Walmart. You put that price sticker on a product and you put it on the shelf. That's what people pay. They don't even question it. And Americans, Canadians, the Western civilization, that's what they're trained to do. They see that price sticker. That's what it's worth. That's what they pay. Don't even question it. So I was willing to pay $1,500 on these loads. I posted them for $1,250, giving myself room for negotiation. I think the highest counteroffer we got was about $1,400 on a number of loads that we posted. I ended up actually paying somebody $1,500 that only asked me for $1,400 because I was trying to give them a lesson just like I'm giving you all right now. I have asked people, and I've left the door wide open. Somebody will call and say, I see you have this load from point A to point B, and I see you have it posted for $1,250. And I'll say, yes. What would you need to get this load moved? Well, I'll take it for that. You wouldn't believe how many times I hear that. Or I'll hear, well, could you do about $50 more? You wouldn't believe how many times I hear that. So in these Facebook groups, and I specifically the Rates and Lanes group, and that's been a very active group lately, I tell everyone, avoid posted rates on a load board. Do not search by a posted rate. I promise you the posted rates are the cheapest rates out there. The top load might be fine. The top load might be a decent rate. You could still negotiate on that. But even the lowest posted rate statistically moves 3 times faster than loads that do not have a rate. And I promise you the highest posted rate may not be the highest dollar amount that you can get on loads that may not have a posted rate at all. I wish that as you could just turn that column completely off. If you look at the DAT load board on a tablet or a smartphone, if you look at the website version and you have a small screen, it automatically adjusts to give you the view and it removes that rate column. And I think that is the best way to view that screen. Do not even look at the rate. Don't search by rate. Don't let that rate set your anchor. Set your own anchor. Set an extreme anchor. Do it subtly. Talk slowly. Brace them for the impact by saying something. I understand that my offer is probably going to be higher than you expect, but I would like to have this extreme anchor. That changes their table. They now are thinking about bigger numbers. They now are playing in your ball field. So let me go to some of these comments. I like to think of walking down a hallway with a bunch of doors open, closing them as I negotiate with the brokers. As I close them, this is an objection, or not that I am getting out of the way, getting to that mutual agreement. But we need to know what the objections are, and for the record, there's only 5 objections. When you get the click, just call the next broker with the load on the board. You're making a good point with a real broker negotiation. Let them know, let them know if anything changes for them. Feel free to call me back, and I'll get it smooth for you. Don't be afraid to hang up on them. I'm going to address that really quick. Don't ever hang up on anybody, ever. Leave an offer, and like you said, you may call me back if anything changes. Leave your offer, and politely just let them know that you guys are not in the zone of possible agreement. I understand that rate is not quite what you'd like to move it for. This is really what we would need. But please, if anything changes, let me know. Thank you. Have a great day. Then you hang up. Don't hang up. Don't just drop the phone on them like some people might do. And Lucas, of course, because everyone cuts the rates from carriers just to move their truck, and when we ask for $1,500, as we know, the rates you guys still lowball it to say have it for $1,250. I ask you for $1,500. You say, hold on, I can do $1,300. Make it $1,450. I'll do $1,350, and that's how the highest you'll go. Lucas, I just explained to you that the highest I would have went on that particular load was $1,500. Matter of fact, I gave $1,500 to somebody that only asked me for $1,400. I told them that they were undershooting themselves, and I explained to them that I was just putting an offer on the board for $1,250. That was just my offer, and I gave them $1,500. If they had asked me for $1,500, I probably would not have given it to them. What they should have asked me for was $1,700. But most of them are too timid and don't understand the market well enough to even ask for the $15. Most of them only asked for $50, maybe $100 more. I think the highest I got was $150. It was $1,400 is what they asked me for on a $1,250 posted load. Had they asked for $15, I would have haggled with them a little bit just to give them a little pressure, just because that's what I do. And then I would have gave them the $1,500. Most people don't win in a negotiation with me unless I'm feeling very generous. So when they ask me for $1,500, I just use it as a training session, and I explain to them where they should be and how they should have handled it, and I give them the $1,500 that they asked for. If they were smart, they would have countered with an offer that was equally different and started around $1,700 or $1,750. That's really what they should have done. But frankly, they didn't know their numbers well enough, and most people don't. And everybody that's watching this video, I think you are far ahead of most others. Most people don't even care. And those are the ones that aren't going to negotiate. So Cindy says, I like to make several calls to get a sense of what the offers are compared to the average DAT. Gives me an idea how high I can bid. And that's true. And as part of your research, and as I said in the beginning, getting them to set the anchor first is a good way to fish for information. Get them to set the anchor, crunch them a few times, see how far they move. If they set an anchor of $1,000 and you crunch them, ask them for a little more, and they instantly come up to $1,200 or $1,300, you crunch them again and they move some more, you know that there's a lot of room to negotiate and they're far off. But if you start calling a few brokers, you ask them to set the anchor, and after you crunch them a few times, they don't budge much at all, you're probably closer, and that is closer to the zone of possible agreement. Stuart says, Kenny, from a broker standpoint, why don't all brokers put a rate then? I will tell you, I don't put a rate most of the time. The only time that I put a rate is when I'm looking to move that load quickly. And the reason I don't put a rate is if you call and ask for one of my loads and the first thing that you call about is money, I'm not interested in working with you most of the time. Because what I do requires more than just pickup and delivery. I need you to pay attention to what you're doing. I need people that have the right equipment, that have the right experience, that know how to handle the load that I'm doing. I want somebody that wants the details first. Most of the time, and I will tell you this, if a carrier calls me, and I have had this happen, if a carrier calls me and I answer the phone, I say, hello, this is Kenny with Patriot Star, and they say, yes, I'm looking at the load from point A to point B. I'd like to do that for you for $2.50 a mile. They do a rate per mile. They don't even give me a number. They don't ask for any details. I tell them, no, thank you. I'm looking for a carrier that I can trust. And I usually tell them, have a nice day, and I hang up. I'm not interested with working with anybody that only cares about the rate. So Ben says, you need to advertise your channel more. Thanks to your discussion, I have no problem pushing up the rate. I want to move a load. Just click, just saves me time to fail the next number. Just open my authority, help me with a few loads. We don't broker a lot of volume. Most of our stuff goes on our own trucks first, and we broker what our trucks can't move. So it's not a whole lot. And however, if we have anything that matches, go to the Truckers Load Board group, and you'll find some stuff over there when we have something. Or you can search for our loads under Patriot Star on the load board. We use DAT. So setting an anchor, and this was going to be a 10-minute video, and I will do an edited video, a nice, well-produced video, but setting an anchor changes everything. And the person that sets the anchor, if they know what they're doing, almost always wins. I posted something in the Rates and Lanes group called win-win negotiation. A lot of people talk about win-win negotiation. The biggest pushback I get from that, a lot of comments I get back from that is, win-win negotiation just means that you're trying to build a relationship, and the only way you'll build a relationship is by giving a lower rate. And that couldn't be further from the truth. I will pay more, and I love to work with carriers that don't care about the rate. They care about the service they provide. That's how you build a relationship, and I will pay everything. I have paid every dime that we've had on a load in the past. I've lost money on loads. There was one just last week. It was, I think we paid the truck $2,300. We took a $63 loss on that particular load. But the carrier got it done. All right, here's a good question. Jazz Nicole says, I'm a new broker, so I'm going to change gears because I've been trying to address from the carrier side, but this is a good question. I am a new broker, and I've been given cheap freight. How do I negotiate with my shipper and not lose the opportunity? Couple of things on that. First of all, hold on, and there's a couple others I might be able to incorporate this. In the beginning of learning, yes, low self-confidence from not knowing your numbers and taking time to think about how the deal can go down. And William says, I want tips on negotiating layovers. Okay. I negotiate with my shipper and not lose the opportunity. A couple of things. First of all, we are in a commodity market. Brokers are also a commodity. So depending on who your shippers are, some shippers are really auction block style negotiation. RFQs, request for quote, request for proposals. If that's the style of negotiation, all they're doing is looking for rates, you may have a hard time with that. Those types of shippers, as a broker, you'll make your money on quantity, not quality. You're looking to move as many loads as possible, probably not going to make huge margins on those. If you're dealing with a shipper that you can negotiate with, you use all of the same tactics that I'm explaining here. The anchor that is the center point of this particular video is absolutely crucial. But there are other tools that we'll talk about. Remember, though, it's all psychological. You are trying to solve their problem. They have a load that needs to move from point A to point B, and you are going to do that for them. The money is secondary to that. They don't care how much it costs as long as it gets there. That's the first priority, getting it there safely and intact. The second priority is to do it as cost effectively as possible. I want tips on negotiating. Okay, and Ben, let me, before I skip too far, Ben, in the beginning of learning, yes, how low self-confidence from not knowing your numbers and taking the time to think about the deal can go down. Absolutely. Our highest grossing truck knows his numbers backwards and forwards. He has a little card taped to his visor. He flips that visor down. He's got all his numbers right there, depending on how the length of haul, the time involved. He knows exactly what he gets. I actually just posted the numbers from our fleet in our private Facebook group the other day, and our highest grossing truck by far, we're talking 6 digits higher than the next truck down. That's what he does best. Knows his numbers backwards and forwards because he's got them right in front of him at all times. Confidence is everything. Absolutely everything. Knowing what you're doing. Because if you sound weak in a negotiation, you're going to sound like a weak person overall. A wimp. It'll be a wimp win negotiation like I talked about. You're not going to get the money you want because you can't be trusted to do the job any better. Somebody that knows their numbers, knows their business backwards and forwards, that's the person that can be trusted to get the job done and solve the problems. That's super key. You mentioned in the beginning of learning, I have talked to people that have been in this business for decades, 20, 30 years, that are still super weak when it comes to negotiation. They don't know their numbers, and they're still running their business from a bumper sticker slogan. I want tips on negotiating layovers. That is super easy, especially right now with the storm relief efforts. There's a lot of layover situations and detention in those areas, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, even in Atlanta, Georgia area is overwhelmed, and some of Tennessee is overwhelmed right now. There's a lot of detention and layover possibilities. The first key is always bring it up in the negotiation. So you're going to make your offer. You have all of the details. So we'll talk about detention a little first. You have all of the details. And you say, I understand this load moves from point A to point B. These are the details. I would like to do this for you. I will include, remember, everything is psychological. Phrase it correctly. It's not free time. Nothing is free. There's no such thing as a free mile. Deadhead is not free, and your time is not free. Deadhead is paid by either the last load you delivered or the load you're going to pick up. It's not a free mile. Your time at the dock is paid by the line haul that you quote. So if you quote a load based on a 2-hour load and unload time, let's say it's $1,000, and you say, look, I will include 2 hours for loading and unloading, and I'd like to do this for $1,000. After 2 hours, I'd like to have $50 an hour. Oh, no. That particular customer only pays after 4 hours. Oh, no problem. I can include 4 hours for $1,100. It's not a problem at all. But would you prefer that I do it for $1,000 and $50 after 2, or would you prefer to pay me for those first 2 hours up front and I'll do it for $1,100? You put the ball in their court. Give them the option and explain that your quote, what you are quoting them, includes that time. And if it's beyond that time, this is what you would like to charge. And they can take it or leave it. They have the option to negotiate. Maybe they don't want to pay that much per hour. Maybe there's more time, and you have the option to counter and include more time for more money, of course. The same thing for layover. Especially, layover gets pushed to the side most of the time because it's a very rare situation. But right now, it's not so rare. So include that layover time as well, just like you would include detention. And you would say, I will do this load for $1,000, including 2 hours to load and unload on either end. I'd like $50 an hour for detention time because I know these facilities are very backed up. And if it turns into layover, I would like a $500 layover fee or $1,000, whatever your number is. If it turns into a detention time, after 10 hours of $50 an hour, I would like an additional $500 for layover for the next day. include that. And if they say, oh, we only pay $250 a night, oh, that's no problem. I will do this then for $1,250, and I will give you a bonus of, I will reduce the rate by $250 if there is no layover involved. See how they take that. Why don't brokers like to pay for detention? Brokers don't like to pay for detention because the shippers and receivers don't understand it, and the brokers aren't good at explaining that to them. I have a shipper, for example, that we do some show freight for. And we had a truck that was laid over. It was about 4 hours of layover, and we told them, look, we would like to charge you for this extra time. And they said, I bought this truck exclusive use. I don't want any other truck. That truck is here all day. I paid for that truck to be exclusive use. And we said, I understand it's exclusive use. They're not going to put anything else on your trailer, but they included 2 hours of loading and unloading time. And because you've kept them so much longer, this will make them late for the next load. And I explained this, and they said, so what? And I said, well, think about it this way. If they're late because you held them up, what will happen to the next load, and what would happen if you were the next load? What happens if they show up 2 hours late for your appointment? And they said, oh, I understand now. I understand why it's important. Now, the thing about detention pay as a carrier that you need to understand is it needs to be used as an ultimatum. They can pay you, or they can pay another employee or a forklift driver, or the broker can pay to make sure the communication is done properly. I will say this, because a lot of shippers, especially some of the smaller shippers, don't understand the concept of detention, most of the time it does come out of the broker's pocket, so they're very stingy about it. And they'll say things like, well, the shipper's not going to pay. I understand the shipper's not going to pay, but I don't work for the shipper. I work for you. I work for you, and this was the price that we agreed upon, and it needs to be in writing on the rate confirmation, especially now when it's a high risk of detention or layover. Make sure it's in writing. Usually, and he says, usually brokers refuse to pay detention and layover, and I have not found that to be the case if it's pre-negotiated. If it's not pre-negotiated, for example, most of our flatbed drivers, detention and layover type situations are more rare than, for example, reefer. Reefers, every facility you go to, especially grocery warehouses, there will typically be layover. It's not as common with our flatbed guys. So the flatbed guys typically don't even bring layover or detention up. When it happens and they try to press for it, because it's a little less common, I think that they don't get as much pushback, and the broker understands. But there's been several times where they don't get what they'd like to have because they didn't bring it up in the negotiation. So I've been trying to push our drivers to make sure they bring that up in the negotiation the same way that I just mentioned. I will include 2 hours to load and unload for this rate, and it would be $50 an hour if you keep us beyond those 2 hours, or whatever the price is for them. And Ben says, have your charges set and put into your rate confirmation. It's agreed to then and done. And absolutely, always try to get it in writing up front. Ben says, darn right, build your chart, have it where you can see it with charges for variations of work you will need to do with the details of the load. Exactly. It gives you the appearance of confidence. And most people should know their numbers backwards and forwards, or a very, very close idea of what they need. And no matter your system, whether it's your daily cost, your cost per mile, your missed opportunity cost, whatever your charges will be, need to be very accurate and consistent, and you need to know those numbers. You need to know exactly what you need to charge for the price for every load. Most detention is negotiated on the carrier packet, and I have not found that to be the case. And what is on the carrier packet is the minimums. That is what they would agree to, but you can negotiate that on a load-by-load basis. I don't remember the last carrier packet that I filled out that had that rate on it. I mean, some of the big brokers do, like TQL or Coyote has that on it. I'm having a dispute with Coyote over stuff like that right now. But most brokers do not include that on the carrier packet. That needs to be negotiated on every single load. There are brokers that will include that on the carrier packet, and some carriers like to put that addendum in with the carrier agreement so that they always have that contractual agreement to fall back on. But I do not think that's the best way to do it. I think it's better to negotiate on every single load. Because there may be a load that does not pay detention, but maybe it's a $10,000, 20 mile or $20 per mile load, and it pays phenomenal money and it delivers next day or something like that, right? There might be some phenomenal load, and they look at your rates and they say, no, I can't do it. This guy charges $50 an hour for detention, and my customer only wants to pay $40 an hour for detention. I would hate to lose a phenomenal load over something as trivial as that, and then it ends up being no layover or detention or anything anyway. So obviously that was an extreme example, but I don't like to have those in the carrier agreement. Carrier packet is who, and general details, the rate confirmation is a contract of that one load with details. And absolutely correct. Even if it is in the carrier packet, the rate confirmation is an amendment to the carrier packet, and if you agree to something different on the rate confirmation, that changes everything. And Dave Casanova, I'm tongue-tied here. Columbia Glider Dave on YouTube, one of our drivers here, and he is one of the ones that introduced me to some of these new ideas. But emotion changes the ZOPA. Absolutely. So when you're throwing out that anchor, you're trying to play on their emotions, and you're going to use a little bit of empathy, and you're going to say, I know that this offer is going to be more than you expected, but I would like to move it for this. And that softens the blow, and they don't feel like they're being attacked. And that's what I was talking about earlier, Dave, if you didn't get in there. And William Hepler says PepsiCo, and I'm assuming he means that's PepsiCo is one that has that in their contract, and that may be. There are several brokers that do, a lot of the big ones, and a lot of brokers that specialize in very, very commoditized freight, dock-to-dock, very general warehouse freight. They may have that because they need something that's rubber stamp pricing. And if that's the case, again, if you negotiate something better, especially now, you could say, look, I understand that that's in the carrier agreement, but I'm going to North Carolina. If I'm going to North Carolina, hurricane just came through, and I know that warehouses are closed or backed up for days. We're going to have to renegotiate this, because it's one thing to hold my truck for one day, but if you're going to hold me for a whole weekend, and I know his story there, if you're going to hold me for a whole day or for a whole weekend or 5 days, a week, which I think is what happened to him, he held for a week, then we need a better agreement. And Dave Casanova, I still recommend Chris Voss's book, Never Split the Difference. And that is where this concept kind of came from. But I've been doing a lot more research on negotiation. Like I said, I'm about to release some new videos on negotiation. This is one of the big sticking points with me. And Chris Voss was a former FBI negotiator, wrote the book, Never Split the Difference. And I think his stuff, it applies much more to freight negotiations than the standard win-win negotiation style that is taught by most negotiation coaches. And William says he finally just got back from delivering that load that he was stuck on for a week because of this storm. Detention is already in the rate confirmation. I even had an email confirmation, but the broker refused to pay. And if that's the case, you have other legal recourse that you can go after them. The broker bond will not cover it, but you can send it to collections. You have a contractual agreement. Frankly, a broker could have $1,000 in their agreement and refuse to pay you for the line haul. You could file on their bond, and their bond may say, I'm not going to pay it for whatever reason. You have other recourse. You can take them to small claims court. All right, looks like we're wrapping up with some of the comments. You move to collection. Exactly. If somebody doesn't pay you for something that they're contractually obligated to, send it to collections. Baxter and Bailey type collections. Hire an attorney. It will cost you money, but that is part of business. A lot of businesses will go out and not pay for anything. And again, it could be $1,000 line haul that they don't pay you for. What do you do about it? You send it to collections. You might not collect 100% of it, but that's the process. A lot of places, because it might be at $50, $100, they feel that because it's only a $50 or $100, they're going to stiff you for it because it's not worth taking them to small claims court over it. Costs you more to sue them than it would be to just take the loss, and that happens quite often, unfortunately. But that's the nature of business. It does happen in several businesses. All right, this was only supposed to be a 10-minute video. Looks like my internet's fading again. So I'll say this. I'll wrap it up. Let me give you all a summary. The anchoring effect changes everything. It's a psychological effect, plays on your emotions, and you instantly change your ZOPA, your zone of possible agreement, as soon as you hear any number. As I illustrated in the very beginning of this video, any number could be something not related whatsoever, but having that number in your head can change everything in the negotiation. Do not let an anchor sway you, although it's almost impossible not to let it sway you some. It will sway you one way or the other, maybe not as much if you're more confident. But have your numbers. Be very confident in your numbers. Show that confidence in the negotiation. Don't be offensive. Set high anchors and make sure that you are play on your opponent's emotions as well. And make sure that they are not offended by your anchor. Use terminology that downplays the offensiveness, such as, I understand that this is more than you might expect to pay, but this is what we would like to be at. Set some deadlines. Put some pressure on in non-offensive ways by making them think that you have other alternatives. We call it, in some places, we call it a BATNA. If they think you have something else on the table, if they think that they may lose something, there's another video I'll do on something called loss aversion. People are more likely to try to avoid loss than to go for a win. And so if they think that they will lose the opportunity to buy your truck if they don't quickly come up with a number, they're more likely to give you the money that you're asking for. So if you say something like, I know this is more than you wanted to pay, but I'd really like to be at $5,000. You can take it to your boss if you'd like to, or renegotiate with your customer, but I know I've got some other loads that I'm looking to move. So if we don't hear back from you relatively quickly, I don't know if I'll be available. It plays on their loss aversion, and they will be more likely to quickly make a decision in your favor or counteroffer to a closer number than they may have otherwise. Use a range of numbers to seem less aggressive. If you are very strict and stern to say, I need $5,000, they're going to feel like, whoa, he's attacking me and that number's crazy. But if you say, well, I'd like to be somewhere in the $5,000, $5,100 range, it seems like you're still thinking about it, and it gives them the impression that, yes, this is still negotiable. Takes the edge off of the number, but it does at the same time sets that psychological ZOPA. So I'm going to read a couple more of these comments here, and then we'll wrap it up for tonight. Will this video be available to rewatch because I missed the first part? Yes, as soon as here, I will hit the submit button, and it should be ready to rewatch. May take a few minutes for Facebook to process it. Love your videos, by the way. Just watch your video on IFTA. Thank you very much. I'm going to redo that video because I've got some updated information, and I think I could speed it up a little. I've never done that, so I think I'll try to update that video soon. And thank you, Cindy. Have a great weekend as well. And Dave says it's like a lane change when done tactfully. They let you in. And really what you're trying to do is you are trying to lead them to what you want them to offer. Now, he mentioned Chris Voss. Not the ones I deal with. They say take it or leave it. Well, Cindy says not the ones I deal with. They say take it or leave it. Okay, so as I mentioned before, there's two things that are going against you. Either, number one, you're doing it wrong. Or number two, you're dealing with the wrong customers. Everything is negotiable in this business. If they say take it or leave it, there's a reason. It might be your tactics, your tactfulness, or just the customers you're dealing with literally have no room for negotiation. If that's the case, you should be able to figure that out, fish that out by asking the right questions. Some of this builds on relationships. Even if it's somebody that you've never talked to before, by leading them to give you the answers that you want, and by phrasing your wording correctly and leading them to the answer, leading them to ultimately they feel as if they came up with the solution and it was their idea to pay you what you wanted, but you led them to that answer. They feel like they win. Ultimately, in your mind, you feel like you won as well. But if they feel like they are in control, absolutely you've built a relationship with them, because the next time they're going to feel the same way. But you are ultimately in the driver's seat, no pun intended, and you have control over the negotiation, and you got the number that you wanted. The name of Chris Voss's book that we recommended is Never Split the Difference, and that's what you're trying to get, the number that you want. Not trying to haggle down the middle. I've said it 1,000 times before. I could program two robots, one to start at 1,000, one to start at 2,000, and go, dollar by dollar until they meet in the middle at 1,500. That's haggling. That's not negotiation. But a good negotiator knows how to lead their opponent to the correct answer, to the solution that they want. Sometimes that does mean that you're coming down from your initial anchor point, but you're setting that anchor to intentionally higher than your target. As I said, when I posted a load as a broker, I posted it at $1,250 to leave room for negotiation. I set my anchor intentionally. And I also said that their counteroffer should have been $1,700 if they were a good negotiator, but it wasn't. Most of them didn't even ask for what I ended up paying for some of them. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining this 10-minute live feed that turned into almost an hour. Thank you very much. Have a good night, everybody. It is getting late. Have a great weekend. I will be back live for our regularly scheduled show on Tuesday at 7 p.m. Watch the Facebook groups, watch YouTube, join the YouTube channel if you're not already over there. I'll be releasing some of these videos. I'm going to do short, again, 10-minute videos. I'm going to do some edited videos, and hopefully I'll be able to get some good information out in a quick, concise period of time. I spent a lot of time answering questions, but I think it's good stuff. So I'm pretty passionate about this, if you can't tell. Thank you guys for supporting me. We're going to have some good stuff coming soon. I've got some good announcements, some things I'm working on in the background. I haven't done a whole lot of shows lately because I've been working on building our brokerage and our trucking company, but I have been putting together some plans for our next event, which hopefully I'll have some information for you in the next few weeks. So stay tuned for all of the above. Have a great weekend, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us.